On our honeymoon, my newlywed husband met a friend from the university. What I saw shocked me, and then Hi, I'm Emma, a 27-year-old woman, and I just got married to the man I thought was the love of my life. Now, I have to ask, how do you know if you've made the biggest mistake of your life before it's too late? Let me start from the beginning. I met Zach 3 years ago at a friend's wedding, of all places. He was the best man, and I was the maid of honor, so we were practically forced into each other's orbit. But it didn't take long for sparks to fly. He was charming, funny, and had this way of making me feel like the only person in the room when he talked to me. By the end of the night, I knew he was someone I wanted to see again. Fast forward to now, and we've just had the most beautiful wedding. It was everything I ever dreamed of: white roses, soft candlelight, a stunning outdoor ceremony overlooking the ocean. My parents, Diane and Robert, were emotional the entire day, and Zach's parents, Julia and Mark, spared no expense in making sure the wedding was as grand as possible. They always did that, made sure Zach had the best of everything. And then, as if things couldn't get more perfect, Julia and Mark gifted us an all-expenses-paid honeymoon, a month-long tour of Europe. Paris, Rome, Santorini, it was a dream come true. But the best part? I had my own surprise for Zach. A few days before the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. At first, I wasn't sure whether to tell him right away or wait. But then I decided, what could be more romantic than telling him in Paris, the city of love? I imagined the moment so clearly: a candlelit dinner by the Seine, the Eiffel Tower twinkling in the background, and me placing his hand over my stomach as I whispered, "We're going to be parents." I'd never been this happy in my entire life. Our first stop was Paris, and it felt like stepping into a fairy tale. The streets smelled of fresh bread and espresso, the air was crisp, and the city had this energy that made me feel alive. We spent the first few days being typical honeymooners, eating too much cheese, drinking expensive wine, and getting lost in the streets of Montmartre. Zach was in his element. He had always been outgoing, the life of the party, the kind of guy who could strike up a conversation with a stranger and somehow walk away with a new best friend. I loved that about him, even though I was more on the introverted side. Then came the night that changed everything. On our third night in Paris, we went to a party at an exclusive rooftop bar that overlooked the entire city. Zach's parents had connections, so getting in was no problem. The champagne was flowing, the music was loud, and everyone was in high spirits. That's when it happened. Zach froze mid-conversation, his eyes locked on someone across the room. A woman, tall, blonde, and effortlessly elegant, was walking towards us with a confident smile. "Madison," Zach said, his voice filled with surprise. Madison. The name sent a jolt through me. I knew Madison. Not personally, but I knew of her. She was Zach's friend from college, the one he used to talk about in passing, the one I had always suspected might have been more than just a friend. She looked just as surprised as Zach, but then her expression melted into something warm, almost nostalgic. "Zach, I can't believe this." They hugged. It was a little longer than I liked, but I pushed the feeling away. She turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And you must be the lucky woman who finally tamed this guy." I forced a polite laugh. "I'm Emma, his wife." Madison's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place, but she recovered quickly. "Well, congratulations. This calls for a drink." And just like that, the night took a turn. We ended up sitting at a private booth with a group of Zach's old college friends who just so happened to be in Paris too. The drinks kept coming, and I could tell Zach was having the time of his life. Laughing, reminiscing, completely immersed in his past. At first, I tried to join in, but I was starting to feel off. The pregnancy made alcohol a no-go, and the exhaustion was hitting me hard. After a while, I leaned in and whispered to Zach, "I think I'm going to head back to the hotel. You stay and enjoy." He gave me a quick kiss. "You sure?" I nodded, smiling. "Just don't stay out too late, okay?" "Promise," he said, already turning back to Madison as she refilled his glass. I left the bar feeling a little uneasy, but I pushed the thought away. I was just tired, that was all. Zach loved me. He would never do anything to hurt me, right? I woke up a few hours later, and something felt wrong. I reached for Zach's side of the bed, empty. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Maybe he was just hanging out longer than expected. Maybe he lost track of time. But something in me didn't believe that. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and saw that he hadn't texted. Panic crawled up my spine. I threw on a jacket and left the hotel, my heart hammering as I rushed back to the bar. Maybe he was still there. Maybe everything was fine. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. When I got there, the party had died down, and the place was mostly empty. I spotted the bartender cleaning up and hurried over. "Excuse me," I said, breathless. "Did you see where my husband went?" "Zach." The bartender hesitated, like he wasn't sure if he should tell me. But then he sighed and pointed toward the elevators. "He left with that blonde woman about an hour ago," he said. They seemed close. I felt like the ground had just been ripped from under me. No, this wasn't happening. I ran to the elevators, pressing the button repeatedly until the doors opened. My hands were shaking as I stepped inside, my mind racing. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe they just... I don't know. The elevator dinged, and I stepped into the hallway of our hotel floor. I walked to our door. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle. I turned it. The door wasn't locked. And when I stepped inside, I saw them. Zach, Madison, together, in our bed. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. And then, before I could stop myself, I turned and ran. Because if I stayed 1 second longer, I might never recover from what I had just seen. And now subscribe. I ran. I don't even remember how my feet carried me out of the hotel room, down the hall, into the elevator. My breath was ragged, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard it felt like it might break through. The moment played in my head over and over like some sick, twisted nightmare. Zach, tangled in the sheets with Madison, his arm draped over her like it belonged there. I barely registered the hotel lobby as I stumbled outside, the cool Paris air hitting my face like a slap. I needed to get away. I needed to be anywhere but here. I had no idea where I was going, but I kept walking. The streets of Paris blurred together, golden streetlights turning into hazy smudges as my vision clouded with tears. My wedding ring felt like a weight around my finger, suffocating me. How could Zach do this to us? And on our honeymoon? A part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to turn around, march back to that room, and throw every single thing he owned off the hotel balcony. But mostly, I just felt hollow. At some point, I stopped walking and found myself near the Seine. The water reflected the city lights, shimmering like something out of a dream. A dream. That's what this was supposed to be. Our dream honeymoon. Instead, it had turned into a waking nightmare. I leaned against the stone railing, gripping the edge so hard my knuckles turned white. I could feel my stomach twisting, nausea rising in my throat. And then it hit me. The baby. Oh God. My hands instinctively went to my stomach. I had planned to surprise Zach with the news here in Paris. Imagine the joy on his face when I told him he was going to be a father. But now everything was ruined. I couldn't tell him. Not now. Not when I didn't even know what I was going to do. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out with shaking hands. Zach. His name flashed across the screen, and for a split second, I just stared at it. Then the messages started flooding in. "Emma, where are you? Please come back. I can explain. It's not what you think. Please, I'm begging you. Just talk to me." I let out a hollow laugh, the sound bitter and sharp. Not what I think. I had seen it. There was no mistaking what had happened. More messages. I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. It was a mistake. "I love you. Please don't do this." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the words. I couldn't deal with this right now. I needed space. I needed to think. Before I could stop myself, I turned off my phone. The world went silent. For the first time in hours, I could breathe again. But I knew I couldn't stay here forever. I had to go somewhere. I couldn't go back to him, but I wasn't about to sleep on a bench in the middle of Paris either. There was only one thing to do. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of the nearest airport. The flight home felt surreal. I had booked the earliest ticket I could find and sat in the back of the plane, curled up in my seat, staring blankly at the seat in front of me. The flight attendant offered me a drink, but the thought of alcohol made my stomach turn. I shook my head, pressing my forehead against the window. I hadn't told anyone I was coming home. Not my parents, not my friends. I didn't know how to even begin explaining what had happened. Would they believe me? Would they tell me to forgive him? Would they tell me to fight for my marriage? I didn't even know what I wanted. All I knew was that I needed to be far, far away from Zach. When the plane landed, I took a deep breath, bracing myself for reality. I grabbed my bag, ignored the dozens of unread messages on my phone, and stepped into the cold air of home. I needed my parents. When my mom opened the door, Her face immediately twisted in confusion. "Emma," she said, blinking. What? What are you doing here?" I hadn't even thought of an excuse. I had spent the entire flight rehearsing what to say, but now that I was standing here, face to face with her, the words refused to come. Instead, my lip trembled. And just like that, I broke. My mother's arms were around me in an instant, pulling me inside as I sobbed into her shoulder. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured. "What happened?" I shook my head, unable to speak. She led me to the couch, rubbing my back as I tried to pull myself together. My dad appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed. "Emma." Mom shot him a look, silently telling him to wait. After a long moment, I finally whispered, I left Zach." Mom's hand still on my back. "What?" Dad sat down across from us, his face unreadable. "Why?" I wiped my face with my sleeve, my breath shaky. "Because he cheated on me. On our honeymoon." Silence. Then, "That bastard." I looked up, startled by the sheer rage in my dad's voice. His hands were clenched into fists, his jaw tight. Mom inhaled sharply, looking equally horrified. "Oh, Emma." I sniffled, my hands gripping my knees. I walked in on him. In our hotel room. With her. Mom covered her mouth. Dad stood up, pacing. "I'm going to kill him." "Dad." "No. I swear to God, I'm going to." "Robert," my mom said sharply, grabbing his arm. "Not now." His face was red with anger, but he didn't argue. Instead, he let out a slow, heavy breath and ran a hand through his hair. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling. "I don't know what to do." Mom squeezed my hand. "You don't have to decide anything right now, honey. Just breathe. You're home now." And that's when the guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. I was home, but I wasn't alone. I pressed a hand to my stomach. I hadn't told them. I hadn't told anyone. The secret burned inside me, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Not yet. The first few days back home passed in a blur. My mom barely let me out of her sight, bringing me tea, blankets, and warm meals even when I wasn't hungry. My dad, on the other hand, was furious in a way I'd never seen before. Every time he walked past me, I could see the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands clenched like he was fighting the urge to get on a plane to France just to do something. I spent most of my time in my old bedroom, curled up in bed, staring at the ceiling. I barely touched my phone, but I didn't need to check to know the messages were still pouring in. Zach wasn't going to give up that easily. My mom finally convinced me to turn my phone back on after the second day. "You don't have to answer him," she said gently, "but you shouldn't shut yourself off from the world either." The second the screen lit up, notifications flooded in. 67 unread messages from Zach. I almost turned it off again, but my fingers hesitated, hovering over his name. I shouldn't care what he had to say. I knew that. But against my better judgment, I opened his last message. "Emma, please, just talk to me. I swear to God, I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." Fix this. Like he had just broken a dish instead of our entire marriage. I kept scrolling. It was a mistake. I was drunk. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, you have to believe me. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so hard my fingers ached. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But I couldn't erase the image of him and Madison in that bed. Drunk or not, he had made a choice. And I had to make mine. Before I could talk myself out of it, I typed a single reply. "Stop texting me." I hit send, turned my phone on silent, and threw it across the bed. I didn't check to see if he responded. Natalie showed up that night without warning, walking straight into my room like she had every right to be there. "Okay," she said, plopping onto my bed next to me. "We are officially done sulking." I groaned, burying my face into my pillow. "Nat, I am not in the mood." "Yeah, well, too bad. You don't get to rot away in this room forever." She nudged my shoulder, and when I didn't move, she whacked me with one of my pillows. "Ow, that's what you get for ignoring my calls." I sighed, rolling onto my back to look at her. "I wasn't ignoring you. I was just falling apart." I let out a weak laugh. "Something like that." Natalie's expression softened. "Emma, I am so sorry. That asshole doesn't deserve you." My throat tightened. "I just don't know what to do." "You don't have to do anything right now. You just have to breathe." I swallowed hard. "It's not that simple." Natalie tilted her head, studying me. "There's something else, isn't there?" I froze. For a second, I thought about lying, just shaking my head and pretending nothing was wrong. But the words were there, clawing at my throat, desperate to come out. I inhaled sharply. "Nat, I whispered, voice barely above a breath. I'm pregnant. Her eyes widened, her whole body going still. What? Tears blurred my vision. I was going to tell Zach on our honeymoon. It was supposed to be this big, beautiful surprise. But then, I didn't have to finish. Natalie's expression cracked into something between heartbreak and rage. That son of a bitch. I laughed, but it came out as a choked sob. Yeah. She reached for my hands, squeezing them hard. Emma, what do you want to do? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? What did I want? I had no idea. I was terrified. For the next few days, I carried the weight of my secret like a stone in my chest. I still hadn't told my parents. Every time I tried, the words got stuck. It was too much, too soon. But Zach wasn't making things any easier. He started calling. At first, I ignored him. But when he switched to unknown numbers, I knew he wasn't going to stop. So, on the 5th day, I finally answered. I barely had time to say anything before his voice filled the line. Emma, thank God. I've been losing my mind. I squeezed my eyes shut. What do you want, Zach? What do I want? I want you back. I want to fix this. Please, Emma. I can't lose you. I almost believed the desperation in his voice. Almost. You should have thought about that before you climbed into bed with her, I said coldly. Silence. Then, a heavy sigh. I was drunk. I don't care. Emma, please, he begged. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll never touch alcohol again. Just tell me what you need. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to throw all my pain, all my rage, back in his face. Instead, I exhaled slowly. I need you to leave me alone. Emma. I hung up. Then, for the first time since I left Paris, I blocked his number. The next morning, I finally told my parents. They were sitting in the living room when I walked in, both looking up when I cleared my throat. I took a deep breath. I need to tell you something. Mom's brow furrowed. Of course, honey. What is it? I swallowed hard, my fingers digging into my sleeves. I'm pregnant. The room went dead silent. Dad's face was unreadable. Mom's eyes widened, her hands flying to her mouth. Honey, she whispered. Oh my God. I felt the first tear slip down my cheek. I don't know what to do. Dad exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. Does Zach know? I shook my head. No. And I don't want him to. Mom hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. My voice was firm. I need time. I need to think. But right now, I just need to be away from him. Dad's jaw tightened, but he nodded. You don't have to figure it all out today, Mom said softly. Whatever you decide, we're here. Always. I let out a shaky breath. Thank you. And for the first time since I left Paris, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of my secret felt lighter now that my parents knew, but it didn't make the situation any less complicated. My dad was barely speaking, his anger at Zach boiling beneath the surface. My mom, though still shocked, had immediately shifted into support mode, researching doctors and prenatal vitamins as if trying to make sense of it all through organization. I wasn't ready to think that far ahead. All I knew was that I wasn't telling Zach. Not now. Maybe not ever. The thought made my chest ache. He had been my everything for 3 years. I had imagined a future with him, buying a house, starting a family, growing old together. And now, I couldn't even imagine looking him in the eye. But the universe had other plans. I was at the grocery store with my mom when I saw him. I almost didn't recognize him at first. His back was turned, his posture tense as he stood near the entrance. But then he turned, and my breath caught in my throat. Zach, right here, in my town. For a split second, I thought I was imagining it. That my exhaustion, my emotions, were playing tricks on me. But no, he was real, and he had just spotted me. His eyes widened in shock, then immediately softened with relief. Emma. Panic flooded my veins. No. No. I grabbed my mom's arm and spun around, practically dragging her toward the checkout. Emma, what? Not now, I whispered urgently. But it was too late. Emma, wait. His voice was closer. He was coming toward me. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears as I shoved my groceries onto the belt, willing the cashier to move faster. Please, Zach pleaded, stopping just behind me. Just talk to me. I didn't turn around. My mom, however, did. What the hell are you doing here? She snapped, stepping in front of me like a shield. Zach looked stunned for half a second before composing himself. Mrs. Brooks, please, You have a lot of nerve showing up here. She cut him off, her voice sharp as glass. You think you can just chase her down in a damn grocery store after what you did? Zach's jaw tensed. I had to see her. She won't answer my calls. There's a reason for that, my mom shot back. I exhaled shakily, gripping the cart like it was the only thing keeping me upright. I couldn't do this. Not here. Not with strangers staring, with my mom ready to kill him in the middle of the frozen foods aisle. So I did the only thing I could think of. I turned, met Zach's desperate gaze, and said the words I had been holding in since the night I left him. There's nothing to talk about. His entire face crumpled. Emma, please. Just give me 5 minutes. I forced myself to stay calm. You had your chance, Zach. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Tears welled in his eyes, but I didn't let myself care. Instead, I grabbed my bags and walked out. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't look back. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My hands rested on my stomach, feeling the slight swell that hadn't been there weeks ago. Had Zach noticed? Had he looked at me and known? I doubted it. He had been too desperate, too panicked to notice the small but undeniable change. I thought I'd feel relieved after walking away. Instead, I felt exhausted. Natalie called just as I was about to close my eyes. You okay? I sighed. Define okay. Mom told me what happened. Said she almost committed a felony in aisle 5. I let out a small, tired laugh. Yeah, she's protective like that. Natalie was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, did seeing him change anything? I hesitated. I wanted to say no, that I was still as sure as ever. But the truth was, Zach had looked broken. And for all my pain, I hated seeing him like that. I don't know, I admitted. Natalie sighed. That's fair. I closed my eyes. I just wish it didn't hurt so much. I know, she murmured. But you're doing the right thing. You have to put yourself first. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I don't even know what that means anymore. You will. I wanted to believe her. But I wasn't sure how. Days passed. Then a week. Zach didn't text. Didn't call. Maybe he had finally given up. Or maybe he was just waiting. Either way, I focused on my routine, helping my mom with errands, going for walks, doing anything to keep my mind occupied. But at night, when everything was quiet, my thoughts always drifted back to him. To the way he had looked at me in that grocery store. To the way I had once imagined him in the delivery room, holding our baby for the first time. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing the thought away. I couldn't let myself go there. Not again. It was 2 weeks later when I saw his name on my phone again. I had unblocked him, but I never expected him to actually call. I hesitated before answering. Hello. A pause. Then, I just wanted to say goodbye. My breath caught. What? I'm leaving town, he said quietly. Going back to New York. My dad wants me to start working at the firm. I didn't know what to say. He let out a shaky breath. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I messed everything up. But I love you, Emma. And I always will. Tears burned behind my eyes. Goodbye, Zach. He exhaled slowly. Goodbye, Emma. The line went dead. I sat there, phone clutched in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. Zach was gone, and I still hadn't told him about the baby. The silence after Zach's call felt heavier than I expected. I had spent weeks telling myself that this was what I wanted. Distance, closure, the chance to move forward without his shadow hanging over me. But now that he was really gone, I felt numb. I stared at my phone, half expecting another message, another last-ditch effort from him to reach me. But none came. Just silence. And for the first time, I realized this was it. He wasn't going to be in my life anymore. I should have felt relieved. Instead, all I could feel was the crushing weight of what I hadn't told him. I was having his baby, and he had no idea. I had convinced myself that it was better this way, that telling him would only complicate things. But deep down, there was a small voice whispering, you took that choice away from him. I pushed the thought away. I had made my decision. Now I had to live with it. Life settled into something almost normal after that. My mom fussed over me constantly, making sure I was eating right, drinking enough water, getting enough rest. My dad, while still clearly furious at Zach, had softened toward me in a way I hadn't expected. He didn't push me to talk, didn't try to tell me what to do. He just showed up, driving me to doctor's appointments, fixing things around the house, cooking dinner when mom was too exhausted to. I didn't know how to tell him how much I appreciated it. Natalie checked in every day, sometimes dragging me out of the house just to make sure I wasn't rotting away in my thoughts. You're allowed to be happy, you know, she said one afternoon as we sat on her couch, her feet propped up on the coffee table. I let out a hollow laugh. Kinda hard to be happy when your life is a mess. She nudged my knee. It's not a mess. It's just different now. Yeah, I muttered. Different. She studied me for a moment. You ever think about telling him? I tensed. Nat. I'm just asking, she said quickly. I know you don't want to. I know you think it's the right choice. But does it ever cross your mind? I swallowed. Of course it does. And that was the truth. I thought about it all the time. What if he would have wanted to be involved? What if he had changed? What if he wasn't the man who had broken my heart in that Paris hotel room? But those were all just what-ifs, and I couldn't live my life based on what-ifs. I'm doing what's best for me, I said firmly. Natalie sighed but didn't push. I just don't want you to regret it someday. I didn't answer, because I didn't know if I ever would. Months passed. The seasons changed. My stomach grew. Life moved forward. Zach became nothing more than a ghost in my past, a name that no longer held power over me. I didn't keep tabs on him, didn't ask about him. As far as I was concerned, he was just another chapter that had closed. And I was writing a new one that didn't include him. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a call. Not from Zach. From his mother. I almost didn't answer. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, my instincts screaming at me to let it go to voicemail. But something in me needed to know why she was calling. I took a deep breath and picked up. Hello, Emma. Julia's voice was careful, uncertain. I hope it's okay that I called. I swallowed. Yeah, it's fine. A long pause. Then, Zach told me. My breath caught. Told her what? About the baby, she clarified, as if reading my mind. The world tilted beneath me. He knows. Another pause. No, but he suspects. He doesn't have proof, but he came to me one night, out of the blue, and asked if I thought it was possible. I couldn't breathe. I had been so sure he didn't notice, that he had left town without even thinking about it. But he knew, or at least he thought he did. And now his mother was here, calling me, confirming it. Emma, she said gently, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. I squeezed my eyes shut. You're pregnant, aren't you? Silence. Then, barely above a whisper. Yes. A breath on the other end of the line, shaky and unsteady. Oh, honey. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Julia exhaled slowly. I know you don't owe Zach anything. I know he hurt you. And trust me, if I could go back and shake some sense into him before he made the biggest mistake of his life, I would. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. But he deserves to know. I closed my eyes. Julia. Please, Emma, she whispered. He's my son. And you might hate him, but I love him. And I love you too. You were part of our family. And I want. She broke off, voice cracking. I want to be there. I want to be in this child's life. Tears burned in my eyes. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I had it in me to let them back in. But part of me, a very small part, wasn't so sure anymore. I never responded to Julia. I sat with it, thought about it, agonized over it. But in the end, I couldn't do it. Not yet. I wasn't ready. And so, I let the days pass. I didn't tell Zach. I didn't tell anyone else. I just stayed where I was, letting life move forward around me. And for now, that was enough. Subscribe. And